Hello and welcome to Nick's Pop Culture Podcast. Today I'm going to be discussing the historical artifact of the flappers, and my contemporary artifact is the hipster movement. So I have the flapper movement of the 1920s and the hipster movement of the now and I guess throughout the 90s, early 2000s, and also in comparison to the hippie movement as well in the 1960s. So, to start off, I'd like to discuss the flapper movement, which came first in the 1920s after the 19th Amendment got passed, giving the women the right to vote. Also during this time, World War I recently ended a few years before, and once that war ended, the men wanted their jobs back once they came back to the United States, and the women weren't quite ready to give up those jobs. They liked the freedom. They liked the freedom financially and having money. They also could go out and see movies, which just began getting sound and pictures and color and talking sequences. So there was some large developments in the entertainment industry as well during this time. Also, one of the main dances of the time was the Charleston, which was huge popularity and a huge dance craze at that time, especially for the flappers. And lastly, for this type of era, every single day more and more women got behind the wheels of cars, which was big since cars just started kind of gaining popularity and kind of going mainstream into the middle class family households. So for all those reasons, this kind of shaped the flappers mentality to thrive in this area or this era when women's rights really needed it. And once they got that right to vote, I think it allowed them to kind of propel and go into this direction moving forward of freedoms and equality. And it wasn't quite there fully, but it was definitely the first steps and into getting the feet wet of that certain demographic. So those women were ready for this, and they were waiting. And probably after the war, they didn't want to be pushed back into their housekeeping type jobs where they're just like moms at home or wives at home preparing the meals for when the husband got home from work. They wanted to go out and work themselves and earn their keep, so to speak. And so this is what really shaped them for this era. And the females were very, flamboyant and very testy, rebellious. They, were revealing clothing, cut their hair short, didn't wear their long dresses or um, anything like that as much anymore. So it was just a complete change from style to entertainment, from the war, jobs, dances, movies, pictures, everything, even driving cars. So, and my next topic to compare it to is my contemporary artifact, which was the hipster movement, which also kind of the hippie movement, I guess, but more so hipster since that relates to now and the trends and everything that we're seeing nowadays. So the hipster movement started in about the 90s to 2000s, and it was kind of followed up by the hippie movement and kind of morphed into its own thing throughout. I guess it'd be like the Y2K generation, and the hippie movement was more kind of bell bottoms in the 1960s related to war, Vietnam, the space race, just the heavy politics of the 60s. The hipsters went out against that and generally didn't have a lot of money. Um, kind of wore a little bit more raggedy clothes. It didn't really matter. Comparably to the hipster movement, which first appeared kind of in the 90s and more widely used in the 2000s, 2010. That was more skinny jeans, kind of dress up a little bit or dress to impress, and kind of clean cut, tight wearing clothing. It's almost kind of the opposite a little bit of the hippie movement. Um, and a few things that were popular or are popular during this time. Obviously, there's a lot of dance crazes that have gone throughout the hipster movement. Because we're talking about the Charleston with the flappers, and nowadays, I guess you have uh, certain dances that I don't really know or follow too much on the mainstream. But I know there's like a Fortnite type dance or like different dances that come from video games and um, popular dance crazes. I know there's a lot on like TikTok and things that I don't watch or don't follow, so I'm not super familiar with those. But there are definitely large scale dance crazes that are continually happening, and probably at least every month or every other month there's a new big hit song that everyone creates a dance to. And that's kind of part of the hipster or hip culture, or contemporary subculture. Um, and yeah, in comparison to these two, both of them definitely, or I guess the hipster movement definitely echoed the flappers as far as freedoms and equality in the workplace. Um, there's a lot of movements that are happening throughout the hipster movement. Also, like even females running to become president. So there's a lot of these big movements that are changing nowadays throughout the hipster movement that are kind of echo, I'd say, the flapper movement, and how the women got the right to vote, and also started dressing differently, cutting their hair different, which also hipsters have been doing as well. Um, and as far as motion pictures, we definitely got some higher quality motion pictures that have come throughout the hipster era. Going from the 90s, from the invention of the DVD into the Blu-ray, and now we got Ultra 2K, Ultra 5K, and all sorts of different very high quality color, sound, and everything like that. So there's another kind of big shift in movement as far as entertainment and motion pictures go that echo the flapper era. And I suppose with war, I mean, we've had a few wars here and there, and I don't think there would be too much from echo from that as far as men coming back wanting to get their jobs. That the wars that the hipster movement has seen um, aren't as larger scale as comparably to World War One, so it's hard to echo the flapper movement as far as war goes. And I think both of these artifacts reveal a lot about the society and the time periods. There's also with the flapper movement, you did have prohibition, which was the 18th Amendment in 1919. So that was another kind of way to kind of snowball this flapper movement into more, and you add in kind of the thrill of having speakeasies and underground bars. There, people are drinking illegally. It kind of adds a certain rebellious angle, which the flapper movement, like I already discussed before, has had a lot of traction with that. So you mix in that prohibition with everything else, the 19th Amendment and the 18th Amendment, so giving the women right to vote and making alcohol illegal. At the same time, it just caused the society for the time period to just morph into rebellious state, and it was a very colorful kind of era in time. I know one of my more favorite shows. It's a popular Prohibition era show. Is Boardwalk Empire with Steve Buscemi on HBO, and I recently rewatched it with my wife, and very, very good representation of what I'm talking about with the flappers in that era. Um, there's kind of the clean cut, kind of professional kind of women, and then there is kind of the more eccentric, flapper, rebellious women who kind of stood out, but it was definitely, acceptable to be like that at the time. It would definitely, they were judged and is frowned upon a little. Um, but the main thing about the flappers is that they really didn't care, and they just were the most rawest version of themselves, and they weren't afraid to show it. And um, yeah, that kind of mentality was what they represented for that era. And as far as the hippie and hipster movement, um, I'd say they reveal a lot about the society in that time period as well, especially with the hippie movement and the Vietnam era. I know the main thing that sticks out to me is the one picture of the hippie putting the flower into the soldier's gun when they were protesting, and I think that reveals a lot about that hippie society. And as far as hipster society goes in the 90s and 2000s, um, I think it was uh, a different time. That it was definitely there was a technology boom, I would say, in society during this time with the transition from tape players and Walkmans to iPods and cell phones, and so the hipster movement definitely followed that um, with the trends. So those are some of the ways that I think they reveal kind of about society in the respective time periods. And also with the hipster movement, and we talked about prohibition with alcohol. With the flapper movement, we do have kind of a prohibition on marijuana that's happening right now. Um, and I mean, I guess it's kind of more so the opposite because it's coming legalized, but it's still illegal in places. So there's definitely, a movement where some people are like, why isn't it illegal in my state? Or, why is it still illegal overall? Why hasn't it been shifted away if, people can drink alcohol and it's basically putting poison and toxin in their body. Um, why can't they eat a gummy bear and have better, sleep? It helps them with sleep apnea or whatever the medical case or recreational case may be. Um, so there's definitely a movement in both of those aspects. I believe these artifacts reveal a lot about the individuals who use them. Um, First off, the flappers. I think that this yearning and desire to want to go out and dance and go out and party and wear the kind of clothing they want to wear and not be kind of conformed and confined to a household or to certain duties and to be restricted from basically almost having fun. I think it shows a lot about these individuals and these women that had this kind of deep, passionate fire inside, and it didn't really kind of get unleashed or unlocked um, until the flapper movement, of the 1920s, and once those amendments got passed, I think it just released this inner firepower, if you will, and caused them to kind of propel into this complete shift of society norms. And um, they just said, kind of whatever, we're just gonna go for it and be who we want to be and let it all out there and not be ashamed of it. And it's admirable, and it's especially for that time period to go out against society norms and the general public and what everyone thought they kind of should be doing or kind of how they should look, and they were just like, no, we're gonna change the game. So it's very interesting to see that and to kind of look at the variables that kind of led up to that, or the catalyst of World War One, or whatever it was, or multiple variables that caused this kind of huge shift in society. And then as far as the hipster movement, I think these show that also the same, kind of similar. You know, the hipster movement, everyone just wants to be different, wants to stand out. Um, they want to be, I guess, stand out, but then stand out together with other people, and all come together and wear skinny jeans and um, you know, do all the hot new dance crazes nowadays. And I think it just shows that we do kind of want to be individuals, but we also kind of want to be part of something as well. Much like the hippie movement as well. I think that was a big one where it was just this hot thing at the time, and if you were kind of had any rebellious inkling in you at all, you're packing up your bags and you're heading to Woodstock. So it's I feel like it just shows that deep down we want to be a part of something bigger. I think both of these kind of cultures, or these movements, show that we do want to be part of something bigger. We want to make change, and we don't want to be complacent, and just stuck in the same mundane kind of week in week out thing. We want to go out and have fun, and whatever the case may be. But yeah, there's a lot of pop culture in there to help kind of show that, with whether it's through commercials, or anything like that. People definitely have used the hipster movement and the flapper movement as part of advertisement, to reach out to certain demographics and stuff. So I think that really just shows who they are, as people, and I think breaking this down kind of shows me that how even similar the kind of people who jumped on board the flapper and the hipster movement, how similar kind of mindset they must have been in to kind of want to stand out and do something different. I think maybe the flapper movement might have been a little bit bigger of a movement, not as long lasting, but with the women's right to vote and everything being passed, I mean, there's some big shifts too with the hipster movement. So I guess maybe I redact that statement a little bit, and both are pretty big, kind of in their own way. Especially with during the hipster movement, women fighting for equal pay in the workplace, which I think is extremely important, and should never have been that far off, or that there shouldn't have been that big of a discrepancy between just if you're male or female and doing the same exact roles, the same tasks, but getting paid differently. I think that's very important to adjust and fix that, and the hipster movement has tackled that as well during its time that has been around. So there's some big movements on both sides of the spectrum as far as the people go, and kind of what they wanted to represent, and how they wanted to stand up for their crowd, basically. So I can definitely pick out and decipher their identities, and these individuals that are drawn to these artifacts. I think they just needed something more, and they were missing something. Whether it was maybe parents overworking and working too much, not home, and they had something inside of them that said, I want something bigger, I want to be part of something bigger, and have that kind of shift in society, and have that mentality that I want to do what I want to do, and live my life the way I want to live it, and there's nothing anyone can do or say to tell me any differently. So I think both of those kind of echo each other for sure, and the people that are part of these movements definitely want to be part of bigger change. Even the hipster movement, as far as going green, lowering carbon footprints. I know that's big as well. The hipster movement, not using straws, saving the turtles, driving more electric cars or even hybrids, um, using public transportation, um, you know, not driving or using your bike when you can and stuff like that. I think those all kind of follow that, the individuals that would be gravitate towards the hipster movement. Um, so those are definitely some qualities and things that they have followed throughout to kind of help with their identities and show who are drawn to these artifacts. And lastly, what do these artifacts tell me about the larger story of humanity? Um, I think kind of similar to that last question. I think there is just this this part inside of our minds, inside of our bodies, inside of our hearts, or whatever it may be, that we just needed needed a change in the world and needed something to happen. And once war hit, World War One with the flappers, I think they felt that they were leaned upon, and they were desperately needed, the women of the war, to hold those jobs and keep infrastructure stable as it could be, while a majority of their men were, overseas and fighting. And I think this was just kind of a kick in the shins a little bit to the females of America, and that they're hardworking, and that they would, drop of a hat, sacrifice family time, sacrifice a lot of things, I'm sure, to step up to the plate and fill those duties and roles and jobs that were absent due to the war and everyone being gone. So I think it just hurt a lot when the war ended, and then they just got kind of kicked to the curb, or oh, back in your houses, go do what you were doing before. We'll take over from here. I think that just that hit the female side of humanity really, really hard at that time. And then, like I mentioned before, you mix in, the Prohibition and the 18th Amendment get passed in 1919. It's just kind of two swift kicks to the female psyche, almost. And I think humanity, almost in a way, this was the manifest destiny, or the destiny that just needed to happen. And obviously, I hope not, like the war wouldn't be needed to happen, but these certain huge world events, and I guess nationwide events of prohibition and stuff, I think just projectiled humanity into this new shift of the way we look at things and the way we allow freedoms to both genders, and have that equality, start making this shift towards equality, I guess, more so, with the flapper era. And then once the hipster or hippie and then into hipster movement hit, I think it just progressed so much from the flapper era that it was, hey, now we're at the point where things need to be neutral, things need to be fair and equal. And then that's why you had more, women fighting for equal pay in the workplace, and stuff like that. So I think the larger story of humanity is, I guess, both of these artifacts, the historical artifact and the contemporary artifact, I think helped shape our humanity to where the direction it needed to go. And I think, where there is good, or where there is bad, there can be good from it, and as far as the war and prohibition and some bad laws, but then, you get the women's right to vote out of it, and you get this flapper movement, which allowed women to be themselves and to tap into the creative and artistic side, that has been locked and entrapped for quite some time, I'm sure. So they were just basically begging to get out, and I think in the larger story of humanity, I think the early 1900s and 1920s specifically was a huge shift and change for humanity, and to start making, like I said, that push towards equality into, the 90s, um, when it started kind of actually coming around and kind of starting to balancing out. And now you look at today, and now we're society is accepting of a female president. Um, and if you were to say that to a flapper 100 years ago in the 1920s, I think they think you're crazy, you're out of your mind. We just started wearing, different clothing and cutting our hair, and that's barely accepted. So there's no way a women president would be even feasible, or within the realm of happening back then. So I think we've make a large stride in the past 100 years. Um, I can only imagine what the next 25, 50, or even another 100 years will bring and where we'll be at. Um, so yeah, I think humanity is, I guess, somewhat going in the right direction. And um, yeah, I guess with the war that we're dealing with now, um, I hope, I guess, there can be some kind of good that can come out of this at the end of the day, and that we can, we as in countries can bond together and, um, help defeat whatever that needs to be defeated, or help solve and resolve and come to compromises or whatever it is, and just see eye to eye that we are all humans at the end of the day, and we're all sharing this planet equally and together. Um, so hopefully there can be some good that comes out of this, like war with Russia and Ukraine. Um, but the larger story of humanity is we are going in the right direction of equality, um, especially with, when you got non-binary and everything like that, and you have different, um, people identifying as different, genders and different things. I think we're starting to become a lot more accepting of it for the most part. And with due time, I think we'll all kind of be shifting in the right direction towards this bigger picture of equality, and just seeing people for who they are, just other people, and going about the same tasks and day-to-day things that you or I do. Um, so yeah, I think that about wraps up my podcast here. I try not to make it too long, but try to make it descriptive and informative, and explain myself as best I can and get my thoughts out there. And I hope you enjoyed it, and anyone else that's listening enjoyed it. I had a great time doing this, my first podcast, so maybe I'll try to do more in the future, or another one sometime. But I had fun talking with you and everyone, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed me putting my knowledge out there, and hope everything sounded okay. And yeah, I hope you have a great day or great week wherever you're at. And yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.